When I saw Avengers Infinity War on opening night, the first moment Steve Rogers stepped out of the shadows resulted in spontaneous applause. I don't know what happened in your movie theater, but I imagine something similar. We love Cap, and as moviegoers, we were that excited to see Captain America again. I'll never forget it. What is easy to forget, though, is how Captain America was viewed by the general public prior to Chris Evans' portrayal of the character in the MCU. Earnest and yet both fearless and intimidating, Chris Evans' version of Cap has become a cornerstone of the Marvel Universe. But this wasn't always the case. Back when the MCU was in its earliest days, there were some serious doubts about whether or not Marvel could take a character that was perceived to be old-fashioned and hokey and make him work with contemporary audiences. And then they did. They didn't have to make him dark or edgy like DC and Zack Snyder tried to do with Superman at the movies. Instead, Marvel thought about the core of the character, what made comic book fans respond to Cap in the first place, and then they focused on those things. After all, how did such a risky character to adapt on screen become such an iconic part of the MCU? And why do people connect so much with Steve Rogers in the first place? To answer these questions, let's go back and look at Captain America, the first Avenger, and I'll explain the real strength of Captain America.
I'm just a kid from Brooklyn.
At first glance, at least prior to his appearances in the MCU, Captain America seemed ridiculously out of date. The hero's outfit is essentially a slightly modified American flag, and his mask inexplicably includes decorative miniature wings. He's completely missing the swagger that has made characters like Wolverine and Tony Stark's Iron Man iconic household names. Plus, he's just so gosh darn idealistic. That may be why the producers of Marvel's Captain America: The First Avenger chose to set the film in the early 1940s, in a simpler time. Director Joe Johnston, whose Rocketeer film was similarly bursting with World War II era nostalgia, gives fans old-fashioned heroics with Captain America. In the film, Captain America is in his heyday, and it all works quite well. Still, with his star-spangled patriotism and optimism, Cap might seem out of touch today, which is why we now need the character the most. The first Avenger doesn't try to be hip or tongue-in-cheek, and neither does its central character. Captain America is genuine and courageous. In the early moments of the film, Steve Rogers attempts to fool Army recruiter so he can go fight overseas. Yet the young man is rejected because of his unfit, scrawny condition. The 97-pound weakling from Brooklyn is beaten up in an alleyway shortly afterward, but nothing seems to get him down. He refuses to give up on himself or his country. He doesn't give up. He refuses to back down from a fight, even when it would seem foolish to bother trying. And yes, we see this again much later in Infinity War. In The First Avenger, viewers quickly find out that the wimp has tried to join the military around half a dozen times, changing his name and or place of birth on the application just for a chance to fight the enemy. At best, it seems admirable on screen. At worst, like something to laugh at today. Colonel Chester Phillips, one of the recruiters for the experimental Super Soldier program, played by the reliable Tommy Lee Jones, is the movie's only good guy with any sort of edge, which may explain why Jones gets all the good lines. He, like no doubt many viewers at that time, isn't so sure about Rogers, who is by far the runt of the group of potential super soldiers. However, in a telling scene, after Colonel Phillips throws a fake grenade to see how the soldiers react when under attack, all of the strapping, seemingly heroic recruits scatter when the pint-sized Rogers jumps on the device and attempts to save his comrades. It's in this moment that we see what really makes Captain America so strong, his character. The scientist who developed the amazing life-changing formula said it best in the film. Why someone weak? Because a weak man knows the value of strength, the value of power. If asked to find a flaw in Steve Rogers prior to his transformation, you'd only point to his physical attributes. And, after he gets the only dose of the super soldier serum, he's a foot taller and muscle-bound, and then you won't find any weaknesses at all. His outfit and origin technically make him a superhero, but he's really just a man who gets an extraordinary and timely push toward his true potential, and he immediately becomes the best in every way. Even Marvel Comics' Peter Parker made some big mistakes after being endowed with new abilities, but Steve Rogers as Captain America immediately starts giving his all for the good of his fellow man. He believes in the power of democracy, but also discourses about it often. Maybe, for some of you, a little too often. And it's strange to hear that sort of thing on the big screen. In our postmodern culture, you'd probably be a little disillusioned or shocked by babble about freedom and virtue. So in more ways than one, Captain America is like an Eagle Scout on steroids. It's rather fitting that Cap's only weapon in the majority of the film is his trademark shield. That's good because the man hates bullies, but doesn't believe in killing. While it was surprising to see him use a gun in that first MCU Captain America movie, more often than not, there's no offensive weapon. Captain America's shield is unbreakable, representing the strength of his intentions to protect the people of the entire world. He's a defender of democracy and fairness, and he's doing the right thing to the point of being a little square if he needs to be. Even when he throws his shield, which makes for an awesome visual effect, the analogy holds. Cap is expanding the strength and protection of America to defend the helpless. There is very little gray area in the 125 minutes of running time that makes up Captain America, the First Avenger. The line between good and evil has perhaps never been more clearly drawn, even in a comic book movie. Good is unbelievably good, evil is pure evil, thanks to the Red Skull, who's played in an over-the-top way by Hugo Weaving. The Red Skull even controls his own private army, Hydra, and has evil schemes that surpass those of Hitler. Sure, the fight with the Red Skull that the movie had been building to wasn't fully realized. And perhaps that's okay, because it serves as a reminder that the big problems don't always have easy solutions, despite the most admirable of efforts to thwart them. Besides, it gave us the Cosmic Cube, the Tesseract, and an excuse for Cap to be frozen in time. The First Avenger, as a film itself, ends abruptly, with our hero waking up in modern-day America. Sure, it doesn't end as suddenly as, say, No Country for Old Men, but it feels like a cliffhanger that didn't have time to build. And while this obviously was the setup for the first Avengers film, patriotism, wholesome character, and integrity unfortunately aren't the heavily embraced virtues that they were in Captain America's prime days of the 1940s. But I think as audiences, we still resonate with them. And we admire Captain America for standing for those things, because his greatest strength isn't from his shield or his super soldier strength. It's his character. It's who he chooses to be. When you think about the timing of when the first Avenger was released, just a few months after DC Comics made headlines, when Superman renounced his American citizenship in Action Comics issue number 900, Marvel put the spotlight on its only hero who radiated nationalistic pride. Truth, justice, and the American way have always been Captain America's. They seem outdated, but they shouldn't be. Those things give the film heart and make it about something more than just saving the day or defeating the villain. The film is about recognizing your potential to do good and believing in something worth fighting for, above all else and against any bewildering odds. Cap has always been about potential. He was punching Hitler right in the jaw on the cover of his first comic book in 1941, months before America actually entered World War II. Obviously, his costume has always been bad camouflage for a war hero, since there's no terrain out there made of stars and stripes. But he's always been a symbol for the good in people, a reliable champion whose character, more than his abilities, makes him superhuman. Here's a man who's reached his potential and then is doing something worthwhile with it. Perhaps the films about Marvel characters, like the Fantastic Four, that haven't worked so well could learn something from the setting of Captain America, the First Avenger. For heroes to be seen as timeless, perhaps they should be placed in an earlier time frame where they don't seem like they're trying to be the latest thing out there. Seeing Cap in this historical context makes his legacy all the more understandable. Like the movie demonstrates so well, Captain America remains pure in his convictions, and that's something that's more heroic today than ever. With all due respect to his ability to lead the Avengers, or throw a shield, or win a fight, that is the real strength of Captain America.
Hey! Let's hear it for Captain America!